Die Hard is a slice of nostalgia wrapped in vintage Coca-Cola Santa paper underneath a Christmas tree, topped with a flaming model of the Nakatomi Plaza. Also, Bruce Willis is probably climbing somewhere up in the branches. The question isn't whether or not Die Hard is a Christmas movie, because we all know it is. The question is, does it really matter? Yes, it does matter. I was lying about the last part. It does matter. Hey everybody, welcome to Firearms and Film. If Pentatonix's cover of Hallelujah by John Cale can be considered a Christmas song, then by golly, Die Hard can be considered a Christmas movie. Here at Top 5 Firearms and Film, we try to cover every single gun in cinema history. Okay, maybe not every single one, but a vast majority of the ones from my favorite movies. Don't forget to like and subscribe, take off your shoes, and make fists with your toes. Works. I hadn't even been on an airplane. Because we're about to go over the top 5 firearms in Die Hard. It's the greatest Christmas story ever told.
Easy there, John. Save some for the rest of us, you handsome hunk of 80s era everyman manliness. What do Frank Sinatra and Bruce Willis have in common? Besides a singing career, they both star in movies based off of a Roderick Thorpe novel. Die Hard's primary plot is taken directly from Thorpe's book, Nothing Lasts Forever. Thorpe's other novel, The Detective, was made into a movie starring none other than Frank Sinatra. So there's a connection you know now. The iconography of grimy, sweat, and blood-stained shirts aside, the only thing more popular than the steadily worsening state of John McClane's filthy undershirt would have to be his Beretta 92F. Now, I've covered the Beretta 92 before, and that's because it's one of the most ubiquitous firearms for action movies from the 80s, 90s, and early 2000s. Its full auto version, the Beretta 93R, was the basis for Peter Weller's Auto 9 sidearm in RoboCop. If it's good enough for McClane and RoboCop, then it's good enough for me. The Beretta 92 is an Italian design, and like many things Italian, it's an elegant design whose attractive shape is a function of basic ergonomics. Compared to its predecessor, the M1923, the grip angle of the Beretta 92F is much more refined and natural. With a history reaching back more than 40 years, the Beretta 92F has served in many capacities for countless militaries and law enforcement agencies around the world. It was developed into the M9 sidearm for the US military, and while it's in the process of being phased out, it's doubtful that it will ever truly go away. For John McClane to be seen carrying the Beretta has some basis in reality. While I can't seem to find any evidence listing the Beretta 92F as an on-duty carry option for NYPD officers, the LAPD did in fact issue these to their police force. Of course, it could be that John just likes the pistol and carries it concealed. The elongated cutout on top of the slide is what sets Berettas apart from most other pistol manufacturers in terms of design. Looking like the gun equivalent of a cutout in a sexy dress, the open slide design of the Beretta was engineered to prevent misfeeds and provide plenty of space for hot, spent brass to clear the chamber on ejection. While other Beretta models are available in a variety of rounds, the Italians picked one in particular and stuck to it for the 92F, the 9mm Parabellum. While you can still buy the Beretta 92F in all kinds of configurations, thanks in part to its popularity due to Die Hard no doubt, this custom wrapping tape back holster, probably not so much. Although you could always make your own, I guess. Take that Kydex and you pleather fakes. If the gunshots look bright and flashy in this movie, there's a reason behind that. It's like they're shooting supernovas or something. Die Hard's armory house souped up the blanks a bit to make them that way. They may have gotten a little too overzealous, however, as Bruce Willis was holding the Beretta too close for the scene where he's under the table, and when he fired the gun, he suffered permanent hearing loss. But man, did he look cool doing it. And just make sure you wear ear protection when you shoot. Also, wood tables are not impermeable to bullets, Marco.
Thanks for the advice.
After an encounter with Hans Gruber, who fakes being one of the hostages to earn McClane's trust, McClane hands the Beretta off to Gruber under the pretense of trusting him. With the help of high-tech scene analysis software, or slow-mo and some arrows, you can see that Willis actually holds back the slide release on his pistol while pretending to chamber a round. When Hans goes to shoot him, nothing happens, because, well, the weapon wasn't loaded. The Beretta, being a double action, just keeps clicking. Had Willis not held the slide release, the slide would have locked back, letting Hans know that it wasn't loaded. Go on, Hans. Keep pulling that trigger. I'm sure it'll shoot eventually. It was probably pretty wise on John's part to hold off on using the Beretta 92F in a force-on-force encounter when he first heard the gunshots at the beginning of the movie, as he likely wouldn't have stood a chance against our next firearm on the list. With development of the MP5 beginning sometime in the mid-60s, by its release date in 1970, it was all the rage if you wanted a compact, modular, pistol-caliber full-auto carbine. Even the Green Berets used the MP5 in suppressed form during the latter part of the Vietnam War. History remembers the use of the MP5s in the liberation of hostages during Operation Nimrod. There, they were wielded by British Special Forces that solidified their reputation as the go-to arms for combat operators the world around. Still carried by SWAT units in the U.S. Secret Service even today, the MP5 is touted as being extremely controllable, reliable, and accurate in close-quarters combat, a role for which it was originally designed. The pistol-caliber cartridges that it fires, everything from .40 Smith & Wesson to 9mm Parabellum, allow the weapon to be light without too much recoil. There were even .22 caliber conversion kits for training centers for these firearms. I gotta say, them boys in Alabama would probably have a pretty good time squirrel hunting with these things. We're all Die Hard fans down here. The MP5s in Die Hard were probably chambered in 9mm, as later in the movie McClane takes a round out of his HK-94 and uses it in his Beretta. Before we get ahead of ourselves, let's back up a little bit. The guns the terrorists wield aren't MP5s at all, at least not in their official designation. Rather, they are Armory House developed clones made by cutting down the barrels of the civilian sporting version of the MP5, the HK-94. A fire select control group was then added to the HK-94 to make it full auto. The original HK MP5 models have a series of barrel lugs designed to engage the locking mechanism of a quick detach suppressor. These lugs are visible on the outside of the barrels during close-ups in movies that use the real thing. In Die Hard, however, the outside of the barrels are smooth, indicating that these are just HK-94 sporting rifles with their barrels chopped. Note the absence of a magazine paddle release as well. This is one of the gripes from civilians who bought the first HK-94s that hit the market, as the controls for the rifle didn't mimic the submachine guns. Not to mention that long barrel just ruins the looks of the MP5. That thing's like a Pinocchio nose, because it's lying to everyone that it's an MP5. Luckily, today, MP5s and their clones can still be bought, and, with certain restrictions, even the full auto ones are available to civilians. Phew, that's hefty. Now there's one I can afford. John procures one early on when he rolls down the stairs and breaks the neck of one of the terrorists.
Who said we were terrorists?
I did, Hans. I did. If it seems like McClane is always running short on ammo, that's probably because he keeps his fire selector on fully automatic. You can see him try to conserve some of his ammo once he realizes that he's running out on the rooftop. The utility of the MP5 doesn't stop at its semi-auto 3-round burst or full auto capabilities, however. It's like the Swiss Army knife of submachine guns. Buy it now! 3 tools in 1! Neighborhood terrorists trying to break into your vault? German nationalists nab your wife? Well, this lovely German-crafted MP5 in satin black finish comes in a triple threat version to resolve even the grittiest of gunfight encounters. Call in the next 30 minutes and we'll include some fake feet. Perfect for making you look like you're barefoot when you're really not. Jam fan blades, win shootouts, escape down vent shafts. In all seriousness, there are probably more configurations for accessories on the MP5 than the AR-15, so you can customize the MP5 to your heart's content. Towards the end of the movie, John uses the MP5 to scare the hostages back downstairs before the roof blows, and the FBI shows their appreciation by trying to take him out with a sniper rifle. Thanks, FBI guys. Hans Gruber uses the HK-P7 M13 for the first hostage kill in the movie. Some have speculated that since the villain in the original novel used a Walther PPK, that this gun was chosen due to its resemblance to that firearm. I'd probably have to disagree. Aside from their compact size, the PPK and the P7 M13 look drastically different in both shape and firing mechanisms. Also, the safety for each gun functions entirely different as well. Whereas some firearms, like the Walther PPK and the Beretta 92F, have a slide-mounted safety, the P7 has what's called a grip safety, where if a user does not have a full firing grip on the weapon, it will not discharge. Grip safeties were most widespread on guns like the original M1911, but aside from its position on the grip, the safety on the P7 has a twist. Instead of blocking the trigger, it actually cocks the gun. This grip safety is rarely seen because, well, Hans Gruber is usually holding the weapon. We can get a glimpse of it here whenever Hans sets it down as he climbs up to check the roof explosives. And this is why you always carry a holster, kids. Hans' HK P7 is shown with a threaded suppressor. The prop blank firing gun does not have a threaded barrel extension for attaching a suppressor, so the armorers actually ran the threads on the inside of the barrel. This would be pretty difficult to do on a firearm that's actually designed to fire a round, as the barrel diameter would probably be too small. But with this blank firing gun, it doesn't matter as much, as the only thing exiting the barrel would be hot gases from the blank cartridge. While other versions of the P7 are chambered in .40 Smith & Wesson, .22 long rifle, and .380 ACP, the P7 M13 is chambered in 9mm. Interestingly, Alan Rickman, who played Hans, had a tendency to flinch whenever he fired the HK P7 M13, because, as mentioned before, the blanks were made to be flashier than usual, as well as being louder. If you asked anybody in 1988 what this thing was, and they didn't know, they'd probably guess ray gun. Futuristic in design and operation compared to its contemporaries, the Steyr AUG was probably chosen for this very reason as the main gun for Carl, the quintessential die-hard villain and right-hand man to Hans Gruber. Can we get a prequel explaining these guys' backstories? Because this one's got some fantastic hair. Must be an 80s thing. In the elevator, on his way up to avenge his brother's death, Carl assembles his Steyr AUG by snapping the barrel into place. This is not an instance where a movie takes poetic license, as the barrel of the Steyr AUG has a quick change mechanism built into it. In fact, the entire design of the AUG is based on the principle of versatility and custom configuration interchangeability. It can be quickly disassembled and reconfigured as a long-distance sniper rifle, a short-barreled carbine, a standard-issue battle rifle, or even as a light machine gun. Kind of like the Lego set of rifles. I want one. It's also a bullpup design, with the entirety of the firing mechanism contained within the stock to allow a longer barrel length in a relatively shorter rifle overall. Bullpup rifles are so called because of the relationship between the trigger and the firing parts. The hammer, the actual bolt face, and the magazine itself are all behind the trigger of the weapon. The trigger on the AUG doubles as the fire selector switch. When a shooter wants semi-automatic, they pull the trigger back halfway. Full automatic fire is facilitated by pulling the trigger back all the way to the rear. One of the major disadvantages of bullpup designs are that magazine changes may be more cumbersome for someone accustomed to magazine forward rifle configurations, as mag changes require the user to reach behind the firing grip. The plastic magazine that the AUG uses is translucent and holds one of two chamberings. The NATO 5.56, which is a popular chambering for military troop rifles such as the AR-15, and the 9mm Parabellum, common for handguns and submachine guns. The scope on the early AUGs were solidly affixed to the rifle, but more recent designs have given the user the ability to swap this out for scopes or aperture sights. Of course, the original scope's ring sight is called the Donut of Death, so I'd probably keep that on. Donuts of Death. Yum. This gun has an almost unprecedented flexibility in its modular design. Although, when Carl finally catches up to McClane, this rifle seems as though it might be a little too flexible. As in, made out of rubber. You can see where the scope is solid. Usually, rubber stand-ins are used when a gun is to be thrown around to prevent damage to expensive blank firing guns. Rubber guns are also far safer to point at an actor at close range, as even a blank firing gun can injure someone. Carl is last seen with a Steyr AUG after he springs to life towards the end of the movie, looking like some kind of bedraggled demon dredged up from the lake of fire, hell-bent on revenge. When you want to get it done, you buy yourself a wheel gun. In a piece of movie-making accuracy, the Smith & Wesson Model 15 that Sergeant Al Powell uses to take out the last terrorist, Carl, before the villain can kill McClane, was actually issued to police officers of the LAPD during the time this movie takes place. While it's difficult today to imagine a police force whose sidearms don't have capacities approaching 17, 20, or even 21 rounds, in the 80s, if you couldn't take care of the problem within 6 shots out of revolvers like the Model 15, you were out of luck. With higher capacity magazines for both handguns and rifles falling into the hands of criminals, it has been necessary to up the capacity for police officers as well. Revolvers fell out of favor almost entirely by the beginning of the new millennium, to be replaced by new polymer Wonder 9s, like the Glock, 6R, and a few others. But there's something to be said about the classic design and heavy, reliable build of revolvers like the Smith & Wesson Model 15. The Smith & Wesson Model 15 had a production run of 40 years, starting in 1959. Chambered in .38 Smith & Wesson Special, it has also been called on by the U.S. Air Force Police until it was supplanted by the Beretta 92F M9. The Model 15 is a holdover from the heyday of revolvers before semi-automatics became refined enough, cheap enough, and widespread enough to be a viable option for police and military forces. Even in World War II, with the most famous full-sized 45 of them all, the Colt M1911, most troops were still issued revolvers. Nothing surpasses the craftsmanship of these old revolvers, but it seems they've seen their peak. They've now been relegated to the category of concealed carry and recreational shooting weapons, rather than combat arms. While it's rare to see revolvers in action films these days, unless it's a period piece, we can always look back on classics like this and see them in action. Why is there even a disagreement as to the status of Die Hard as a Christmas movie? I don't know. I don't get it either. If you watch it around Christmas time and it gives you Christmas tingly feels, then why not? There's overwhelming evidence, least of which comes from the creators, that Die Hard is a Christmas movie. So what it ain't Hallmark? I remember making this argument in 2006 to one of my history teachers, and he just shot me down. What strikes me is the vehemence with which some folks will contend that Die Hard ain't a Christmas movie because blah 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 blah. Well, it may not be your Christmas movie. What about Krampus? Is that a Christmas movie? It's got guns too. Death? Snow? A somewhat happy ending? Dunno. Maybe we should review it. Anyway, in the words of McClane, Merry Christmas and yippee-ki-yay.